2:14 in the Strait of Hormuz. A volley of RIM-174, Standard Extended Range Active Missiles, launches from the USS Carney. Solid rocket boosters thunder through the hull as the interceptors surge to Mach 4 in seconds. Their targets, 3 Iranian Noor cruise missiles, skimming just 10 feet above the water, less than 40 meters from a fully loaded Suezmax tanker. If the SM-6 Seekers fail to lock within the next 11 seconds, $250 million worth of global energy could become a massive environmental disaster. This is not a drill. It is the sudden, calculated unraveling of a $3.2 billion Iranian gamble. Tehran has just challenged the Fifth Fleet, and within the next 12 minutes, it is about to watch its maritime strategy disappear in real time. Iran's $3.2 billion wager has just met a wall of integrated steel and data. For years, the IRGC poured resources into underground missile complexes and stealth-oriented Shahed Soleimani-class corvettes designed specifically to pressure U.S. Navy escorts. The assumption was simple: build an anti-access shield strong enough to make the Strait of Hormuz too costly for Washington to protect. That assumption collapses the moment Iranian units move into shadowing positions around the tanker convoy. What they think is a show of pressure instantly becomes a list of targets. The American response is not a warning message or a diplomatic protest. It is the activation of a kill web. While Iranian captains are still shouting orders over unsecured radios, a KH-11 Kennan satellite orbiting overhead has already passed their thermal signatures to the tactical action officer aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln. Iran believes it is stalking the convoy. In reality, it has already entered someone else's firing solution before even clearing the harbor breakwater. Tehran's entire investment depends on the idea that U.S. defenses can be overloaded by saturation attacks. The U.S. Navy answers that theory with information dominance. The instant the first 3 Iranian missiles leave their rails, the AGM-158 CLRASM is already being prepared for the counterstrike. That is the harsh truth of modern naval conflict. The United States does not simply stop the threat. It uses the threat's own emissions to expose every hidden battery tucked into the limestone cliffs. Iran thinks it is springing a trap. Instead, it has handed the U.S. Navy a $3.2 billion opportunity to prove exactly who controls the strait. The Iranian corvettes are now operating inside a full information blackout. They are firing at phantom contacts created by American electronic warfare, while the real RIM-174 missiles are already racing toward them. What began as a bold challenge is turning into a $3.2 billion collapse. At 2:16, Iranian corvettes attempt to lock fire control radars onto the lead U.S. destroyer. That is the trigger. High above, an EA-18G Growler, the Navy's premier electronic attack aircraft, slices through the night. The pilot activates the ALQ-218 tactical jamming system, and in an instant, the Iranian radar picture does not merely disappear. It becomes chaos. This is not basic jamming. It is digital ghosting. Iranian operators suddenly see 50 American ships where only one actually exists. They detect incoming missiles from multiple directions at once. That is the power of the next-generation jammer. It does not broadly interfere. It attacks the exact frequency bands the enemy depends on and shuts them down at the source. In seconds, the $3.2 billion Iranian naval force is blind, disconnected, and effectively shouting into silence. They try to switch to manual methods. It changes nothing. Sensor teams aboard the USS Carney report that Iranian units have lost their data links. Without that digital backbone, the coastal missile sites become isolated. They can no longer coordinate with the ships offshore. U.S. forces have effectively severed Iranian command and control. Still desperate to preserve the image of control, the IRGC launches a follow-up volley of land-based cruise missiles. This is where the system of systems approach proves why it stands apart. The USS Carney does not wait for the missiles to rise into its own radar view. An E-2D Advanced Hawkeye orbiting at 30,000 feet detects the launches beyond the curve of the Earth. Through Link 16, it pushes targeting data directly into the vertical launch systems aboard nearby destroyers. The destroyers do not even need to search with their own radars. They fire using the Hawkeye's eyes. Out of the VLS cells, the RIM-174 SM-6 missiles tear into the night. At $4.8 million apiece, the SM-6 is one of the most advanced interceptors ever put to sea. It moves at more than 2,600 miles per hour and carries its own active radar seeker derived from air-to-air missile technology, allowing it to track maneuvering threats on its own. Within 40 seconds, all 3 incoming Iranian missiles are intercepted only 20 meters from the tanker formation. In the darkness, the flashes are brief and brilliant. In strategic terms, they mark the moment billions in leverage disappear into the sky as fragments. But the U.S. Navy does not stop at defense. In modern combat, a force that only absorbs pressure eventually loses initiative. The most decisive part of the American response is the counter-battery strike. Realizing their salvo has failed, the Iranian corvettes try to retreat toward shallow coastal waters, assuming deep-draft U.S. warships cannot follow. That assumption is also wrong. From the internal bays of F-35Cs, AGM-158C LRASMs are released. The LRASM is the first truly intelligent anti-ship missile of its kind. It does not depend on GPS, which Iranian forces are actively trying to disrupt. Instead, it uses an imaging infrared seeker and onboard artificial intelligence to identify ships visually and compare them against a three-dimensional library of targets. It glides low over the water at roughly 600 miles per hour, hugging the sea surface to remain below radar coverage. And it does not merely strike the Iranian ships, it selects their weakest point, the ammunition spaces, and lands with exacting precision. While the surface engagement unfolds, another threat is already in position beneath the water. The USS Florida, an Ohio-class guided missile submarine, has spent 6 days resting on the seafloor undetected. On the Admiral's order, Florida releases a spread of BGM-109 Tomahawk land attack missiles. At roughly $2 million each, the Tomahawk remains one of the Navy's most reliable, long-range precision tools. These missiles are not aimed at ships. They are aimed at the missile complexes themselves. They follow the contours of the Iranian coastline, weaving through the valleys of the Zagros Mountains at about 550 miles per hour. They do not hit the mountainsides. They strike the ventilation shafts and blast doors of the underground sites. The follow-on detonations from stored missiles are so powerful that local buoy systems register conditions strong enough to trigger tsunami alerts. The message is unmistakable. No bunker is deep enough and no cliff high enough to hide from a kill web operating at network speed. By 2:26, just 12 minutes after initial radar contact, the engagement is effectively over. The Shahed Soleimani-class corvette, a centerpiece of Iran's $3.2 billion modernization program, is left burning and dead in the water. 2 additional fast attack craft are neutralized by RIM-162 ESSMs. The ESSM is the Navy's close-range specialist, capable of extreme maneuvering to eliminate threats that penetrate within 30 miles of the carrier group. The exchange is a disaster for Tehran. In just 12 minutes, Iran has lost nearly 20% of its modern naval tonnage, along with 3 major coastal missile sites. The U.S. Navy, by comparison, has used less than 0.1% of its available missile inventory. That is the cold math of efficiency. For Iranian crews, the event is chaotic and terrifying. For the sailors aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, it is procedure. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tactical action officer checks his watch. Targets neutralized. Convoy clear. Resume standard patrol speed. No celebration. No dramatic reactions. Just a sip of lukewarm coffee, then paperwork for the debrief. To make sure Iran does not attempt a last-ditch move using its remaining submarines, the USS Khani launches a RUM-139D. This weapon is a hybrid system, a rocket that carries a Mark 54 torpedo. The rocket sends the torpedo 5 miles in seconds. The torpedo then drops into the water and begins an active acoustic search. An Iranian Ghadir-class submarine hears the ping of the Mark 54 entering nearby waters and immediately performs an emergency blow, surfacing under a white flag. In this kind of networked battle space, even stealth begins to feel like an illusion. What makes the U.S. action so decisive is not only the physical damage, it is the psychological and electronic shadow left behind. For the next 48 hours, the Fifth Fleet maintains a full electronic clamp over the Persian Gulf. American aircraft remain on alert with AGM-88 harms ready. The AGM-88 is built to hunt radar emissions. The moment an operator powers on a radar to see what is happening, the missile can lock onto that signal and ride it back at around 1,500 miles per hour to destroy the antenna. Iran is effectively trapped in darkness. Its remaining ships cannot communicate properly. Its forces cannot track tankers passing through the strait. They cannot even coordinate their own internal defense with confidence. The $3.2 billion spent to create security has instead purchased a front-row seat to obsolescence. The U.S. Navy then reinforces the message by using the combined presence of 3 carrier strike groups, Lincoln, Ford, and Bush, to form a steel barrier stretching from the Gulf of Oman to the North Arabian Sea. This concentration of force is not impressive only because of scale. It matters because of what the networks do together. When multiple carrier groups link their Aegis systems, they create a shared radar picture covering more than 1.5 million square miles. Every civilian aircraft, every fishing dhow, and every unidentified drone can be tracked and tagged. For the US Navy, there is no traditional fog of war here. There is only data. And yet the most important difference revealed in this encounter is not hardware. It is training. The IRGC operates through a centralized chain of command. A captain cannot launch without approval from higher headquarters, and those approvals can climb all the way to the top. In an engagement measured in seconds, that delay is fatal. The US Navy works differently. It operates through distributed lethality. The tactical action officer aboard the USS Carney, a 28-year-old lieutenant, has the authority to engage anything threatening his ship or the convoy. He does not call Washington. He does not wait for permission. He executes the kill chain he has rehearsed thousands of times in simulation. That speed breaks the enemy's decision cycle. Observe, orient, decide, act. By the time IRGC leadership is fully informed of the first intercept, much of the battle is already over. American sailors are not simply operating weapons. They are managing flows of information dense enough to overwhelm almost anyone. But Aegis and its interfaces compress that complexity into simple choices: engage or ignore. The difficult reality for Iran is that it is not facing a fleet in the old sense. It is facing a network that has already modeled most of its options and prepared responses before the first move is even complete. The United States does not need a large-scale invasion. It does not need boots on Iranian soil. It only needs to remove the systems being used to threaten the shipping lanes. For the global maritime industry, the effect is immediate. Insurance rates fall. Risk in the Strait of Hormuz drops, not because of negotiations, but because one side has demonstrated overwhelming control. When the IRGC challenged the United States to escort the tankers, it believed it was setting a trap for a declining power. What it failed to understand is that for the US Navy, an escort mission can also become a sensor hunting operation. Every tanker becomes bait. Every hostile radar emission becomes a signature to map. And once mapped, it can be tracked, targeted, and removed. By 4 o'clock, the first sunlight begins to rise over the horizon, turning the Arabian Sea into hammered gold. The tanker convoy, led by the USS Abraham Lincoln, continues forward. The crude carriers move like slow islands, calm and intact, their decks quiet and their crews secure. Behind them, smoke rising from the Iranian coastal sites is the only sign that the kill web was ever switched on. If you want to stay ahead of the curve on the technical reality of modern warfare and explore more deep dives into the systems that keep the world's sea lanes open, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We cover the technology, the tactics, and the details that too often get left out of the conversation.